My name is Bruce Gay. I'm a project management professional, certified Scrum Master. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Used to live in the Washington, D.C. area, and I do a lot of work for the federal government. So, my topic today is really about how we can bring learning games into teaching soft skills training. So, the speaker yesterday was talking about power skills. I'm using the term soft skills. So, I'm not using the formal PMI term. So, with a show of hands, who here is an educator or trainer? Okay, so we've got a few people. So, I'm hoping that you will share some of your experience. I want this to be a bit of a dialogue. We've got two microphones and we've got people online as well. But my goal here is just to give you a sampling of some of the things that people are starting to think about to make online training and in-person training more engaging for adult learners, because online training is hard. 8 hours in front of a monitor, you've got to figure out ways that you can engage people. So we're going to look at how we can use learning games to simulate real-world challenges. So I'm going to show you, there's a Risk card game that a colleague and I built probably 5 years ago. It's called Project 911. So the term there is you're managing a complex construction project and it's really going south. And you'll start to see a couple of the cards, and I want some volunteers to share how they've solved for some of these issues. We're also going to look at how we can use learning games for adult learning of the soft skills. And then lastly, I'll share some tips that I've learned on integrating these games into both the classroom setting and workshops that we've done as well. All right. These are two cards. The cards that we have resources, but I want you to focus on the question. This is an issue, and this is part of a simulation game. We're simulating things that have gone wrong on a project. And I'd like to get a volunteer who would like to share what would you do for scenario A, and a second volunteer for scenario B. Scenario A says there were major quality issues that were introduced by a critical subcontractor on your program. What do you do to resolve these quality issues? So again, this is a construction, and the scenario here is a construction job, and you've got basically a subcontractor vendor that is critical, but introducing quality issues to what they're doing. So anybody want to share how you would get out of this particular predicament? Bill, there's a gentleman right up here at the front. There you go, sir. Yes. How would you resolve for this subcontractor with quality issues?
I think I would have to look from within, because if there is a quality problem, there should have been a quality control manager on the project, which from the client standpoint. So I would say that the element would be on the owner's fault,
Okay.
and the owner would have to resolve it by saying, hey, I reviewed your submittal and approved it, but you did not provide what was submitted.
What was submitted? Yep.
So we need to go back and change that.
Change it. Yep. Yeah. Good point. So the gentleman here in the first row pointed out, okay, so the prime contractor, in this case, the owner, this is a very specific term to construction project management. The owner is usually primary project manager, program manager on the team. They would have to review the contracts and then see, did we have a quality plan in place? And then go back and talk to the subcontractor. And this happens. You may have to force the subcontractor based on your contract to go and redo whatever they were doing or remediate what they were doing or to do something to correct the quality issue. But in this particular challenge, it's important to look at what sort of contract you have in place with your subcontractor. Here's scenario B, and this one is very common, I would say. Your stakeholders are angry, and what steps do you take to manage your stakeholders and increase their satisfaction? So every project I've been on, there's always some individual or individuals that may not be aligned or happy with what we're doing. So anybody want to share what they've done or what they would want to do in this scenario? Okay, Jacqueline, right here. Yep. So how would you manage your stakeholders' satisfaction level?
Good morning, my name is Jacqueline. First thing I want to do is wonder, why are they upset? What is it about the project that is a concern for them? So my first question, what is your concern? And then two, I would want to talk to those who were part of that piece that affected them just to get an idea of what we can do. Just hearing from them. I don't have enough information yet.
Yep.
However, I want to be able to hear from the stakeholder what their concerns are and then ask if I can just quickly get back to them, but follow up, letting them know based on what I've learned, this is might have what happened. This is what I can do. Is that okay with you? Because I want their buy-in at the end to let them know I've heard you, and this is what I will be doing to make sure you're aligned.
Perfect. Perfect. Jacqueline, thank you. So just to repeat what Jacqueline said, there was, and I think one of the speakers yesterday, Allie from the University of Maryland Baltimore College, her first step was to listen. She did a listening tour of people at her organization. And so when you've got cranky and angry stakeholders, the first step is really to listen and gather the data. And then, as Jacqueline pointed out, then you take that back and you figure out what is it that we can affect, and then how do we go back and message that back to our stakeholders. And so in this case, in this construction job, just to give you a little bit more flavor, we are using, back in the 1980s or maybe 90s, the Denver International Airport put in a new terminal and a new baggage transportation system. And when they started to bring the media in to show them how wonderful this new system was, it was eating the baggage and ripping it apart. And so it was this big blunder. And so this is part of the backstory in this. Our stakeholders here on this construction job are the airlines who have to park their planes at the airport because they're not happy with some of the new things that are happening. And then you've got customers and people that are getting their luggage damaged. So let me go through two more. These are two more issues that we use in our training. C, this is a big one. This is one of the more emotional ones. One of your key sponsors passes away. How do you deal with the great loss of a great personality that was your sponsor? So this actually happened at Denver. When they were doing the reconstruction, their chief architect, he passed away. And the team struggled and then had to realign. So how would people address your chief sponsor passing away? And if you want to soften it, many of us have changing leadership. So people leave your company, and if you're in the government, you may rotate out and in. Yes, ma'am. Let's see here. Bill, unfortunately, it's over here. Oh, okay, good. Yes. How would you deal with a key sponsor who either passed away or someone that left the company?
Okay, so we actually had this happen at my organization. We'd had
Okay.
someone pass away who was very important, a
Yeah.
great person to all of us. So I think we all started off by dealing with the emotional part of it and trying to get through the mourning because these are people you work with. They're like family. You're with them
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
more than your family. We dealt with the emotional part of it and then tried to go through her tasks and try to divvy them up until we could get to the point, which took a few months of
Yeah.
finding someone to I hate to say replace, that's not the word that I would like to use.
Try to
But
cover what they were doing.
exactly. And then from there we've come up with an initiative to try to do some succession planning so that if not even in the case of someone passes away, if they leave the organization or they're unable to fulfill their duties for some reason, then we know exactly what they were doing and who needs to take it over, what needs to go from there.
Yeah, good. Thank you for sharing. So let me reiterate, and I've seen this in our training when we've done workshops. As you pointed out, there's a mourning period. This person was either a leader or they were very important. They're part of your working family. So you have to deal with the emotional side. And as a project and a program manager, you need to lead your team through that. That is something that needs to happen. You need to recognize people are going to be upset by someone passing away. The second part was looking at how do we cover the expertise and the work and the tasks that individual is doing. That's usually the second step. And then you brought up a really good point, which I see in our what people come to. Denver International Airport didn't have succession planning, but most companies that are doing this well, you need to think about what do we do for our key individuals on our team or on our organization if they were to transfer, move, or pass away. And so as a project manager, not something you need to do, it's not top of mind, but think about what would happen if your your tech lead left the company? What would happen if your chief business analyst was moved on to another program? What would you do? And so succession planning is usually it's a really logical, what do you call it, response to this particular issue. I'm not going to go into the last one, but so as you were reading these scenarios, what type of feelings, what emotions did you feel? Did this feel real as I was having you think through these scenarios? I'm seeing some yes nods. This is one of the important things of bringing learning games and scenarios into the learning environment. You want to be able to simulate, as a trainer, as an organization, I want to be able to simulate that a real life situation so that people can think through the problem. And you might have never encountered it. The lady here, she said, our organization had this. Most organizations don't. They haven't had that type of critical emotional event, I guess, in a way. But part of the learning environment allows you as a manager, as a supervisor, as a project manager, to think through your critical thinking, your problem solving skills, and do it in a way that you're doing it as part of a learning environment. And so as an instructor, I'm trying to build these as close as possible to real life scenarios. So learning games, they help enhance the engagement of your team and help with retention. It helps with leadership skills, the soft skills, because you're actually practicing them before the accident happens. It's also hands-on. I'm starting to explore how we can use ChatGPT. There's a lot of promise there in using ChatGPT in the learning environment to simulate these types of scenarios and give you feedback as you make critical decisions and problem solving. And then ChatGPT and other tools as well can help us to do learning assessment. So one of the things as an instructor, as an educator, how can we measure that our students are learning? And on the job learning, that you're learning, you're gaining, you're doing the work. It's hard for me as someone that's teaching new techniques, soft skills. How are the people in the room going to take that away? Will they retain and use that information 2 to 3 months later? Often I'm working with another company. I don't have the ability to survey those individuals, or it's difficult sometimes to survey individuals and find out, are they improving their project delivery and efficiency because of the training or because of other reasons? But these can also help us with on-the-spot learning tools. So this is a chart that I pulled together. Really what I'm trying to look at here is the cost. And again, there isn't that much data behind this, but it was really just a way to look at something that would have low cost to very high cost and then effectiveness. And so these are, as an educator, trying to look at how we can assess learning. We've got basic things here that are cheap. You've got self-assessment quizzes, end of chapter quizzes, end of course quizzes. You can observe people doing whatever they're doing. So if it's something that's in the labor or trades, you can observe them building something with lumber, or they're doing something. But you get all the way up here where you get into much more costly computer simulations and assessments that have a lot of technology in them. I'm not involved in this, but the Department of Defense has a lot of simulations that they use to help train leaders in the military. And these are computer-based and they're immersive. They're also virtual reality instances, and that gets very expensive. These simulations and gamified experiences, and then what's classified as authentic assessments, which is what we were just walking through, they fall here in the middle. So they're not super cheap, but they're not as expensive as getting a third party to build a software for it. And they're pretty effective as well. So let me just pause there. Any questions about the data that I have on this chart here? Yes, sir, back here. One second, Bill's bringing you the microphone.
Good morning. So for the games, is there a certain benchmark you're looking for the participants to achieve? I know there are very variable ways to achieve certain outcomes for every kind of situation. You brought up the military and DoD, for example. How do you know that they have achieved a certain level of understanding to apply it
Yeah.
applicably to the real world?
That's the difficult part. So the first level, the easiest thing is, were they engaged? So were your students engaged? And these are adult learners that I teach. Were they participating? Most people who are in training are, you can tell that they're participating in both virtual and obviously in face-to-face. But going to the question and the thing that I'm still working toward, how do you know 3 months later, 6 months later, that they're a better project manager because of the training? That's really hard to separate from that individual's, what do you call it, day-to-day learning. Now, the plus on learning games is that you're forcing individuals to exercise critical thinking, perhaps even systems thinking, problem solving, creative thinking, and you're forcing them to exercise that during the training. They may not have that sort of forcing function during their day-to-day work. You are bringing something to them, but it's still hard to tie back to, are we delivering our projects better because of training or because of having learning games? So difficult. Yep. And then I mentioned simulations. So again, the card game that I showed you was a very low cost simulation. It allows for proposing realistic situations and challenges so that people can actually work through those. It gives you a safe space as well. People who are in training, they're not going to often, even if they're with colleagues, they're able to do some trial and error or say things that they may not be able to say in, say, a normal management meeting. And then also it allows for some experimentation, because typically these types of learning games, they're not solo. You're going to want to do them with small groups. So where one person will say, hey, my idea is to approach it this way, a second person may say, let's approach it that way. And then they'll have a conversation about which way you're going. So there's definitely some benefits here in going this route. This is a photo of a workshop that was done last year with the card games. These were project managers, and it's just going to show that it's a collaborative activity, especially when it's in person. And this is using these learning games can help us very much with decision making. It helps us with looking at how do we address certain scenarios. And then also it has collaboration and analytical thinking baked into it as well. And I think we could have structured these learning games with just scenarios. You're given a scenario, how do you solve for that? That's usually the most basic way. But by introducing the cards, and the cards had some resource points associated with them, and they were allowed to choose which scenario they wanted to address, that gave an element of, it amped it up a little bit. It made it more interesting and more engaging for the students. And while we're doing this, we can practice communication, collaboration, strategic thinking, conflict resolution. You're negotiating with other people. And again, here we've got one of my co-instructors with 3 people on the same team as they were working through what they would do. So as part of this, we spent the morning learning about risk management. It was more of an intermediate class. So these were project managers who had been managing projects for a while. And so it was a refresher on what are the standards around risk management, what are the best practices for managing risk and documenting risks. And then we spent the afternoon walking through these scenarios. So having people exercise their critical thinking in that respect. These are just some high level, what type of learning games there are. So you can role play, they're scenario based. You can do crisis management and team-based problem solving. So this different ways to design how you engage your adult learners. And everything I'm saying here, you can use with your teams too. I was just speaking with someone who needed to do team building and facilitation with their team because it's a new group. You can use learning games, facilitation games as a way to do team building as well. All right. Now, what I did was just a quick survey of some of the project management games that I've seen in the marketplace. PM Zone, This is a game I think has been around for 8 years. Apparently, this is like you go through a full project life cycle. It looks a little odd, but they have task, constraint, risk, and delay. So I think this tool down here is really about how to learn the basics or the standards around project management. I found another group that was doing how to manage a project when you've got diverse stakeholders and how do you communicate things around this. This was obviously online. This was more role based where you would get a question from one of these characters and you would respond to it. There's another game called Project Risk, and I haven't really studied it too much, but again, it's trying to teach adult learners and high schoolers how to manage risk on your projects. And so it looks like it has some sort of trail here. MIT has an online simulation that's related to construction project management. So they built that. And then the cards up in the upper right are mine, the Project 911 sort of risk issue simulation that we have. So there are some learning games that are out in the marketplace. I wouldn't be surprised if at every university, there's probably one or two more that just aren't, advertised very well. And in fact, there is a community of practice within the federal government that looks at learning games. And they've got a couple. One was on environment. And then there was one actually, I think, on trade. And again, those are more for high school or younger college students. It wasn't really for professionals. Let me pause there. Have anyone come across other learning games that you might be applicable to a project management audience or adult learning audience? No? Okay. Yeah, there aren't that many out there. Now, these are just some tips. Oh, go ahead. Yes, please. Yeah.
Hi. So I haven't come across other learning games, but how do you see ChatGPT and AI changing the landscape of these learning games as we
Yeah.
continue?
So my vision and what I see other people doing, I'd love to bring ChatGPT into the classroom. There are restrictions. So if you're a federal employee, you may not have access to it. Now, I do know that the Navy has their own version. It's on the NIPR network. I'm sure there's other secure network and other GPTs that the federal government has. But also with a private company, one is, can we bring that in? Can people interact with it? Can we sit at the course training and interact with the laptop? What I see, it's building out the right prompt and what I've done, and I've got two instances of this. One is you set up what you're trying to assess. So I'm trying to assess decision-making, critical thinking, and problem solving. So that's my assess the student on this. Give them 4 or 5 scenarios. And so the scenarios I was giving can be things like you've got a 15% budget cut. How do you reduce the headcount on your team? Or you've got a new group of requirements that have been dropped in your lap. How does your team work through those? And I've been able to get it so that you can use ChatGPT as an individual by answering a series of questions. It's like having your own tutor sitting across the table from you. And then in the end, I give it a rubric so it knows how to score the individual, and you can score that person. So you can say, here's your summary score. You got 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 5 out of 5. Overall, you got a 4.7. And you can give that, and that whole process, people have had test that. It takes about 30 minutes, and they get a scenario. All right. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things I've come across recently is one that uses your computer with a camera, and they give you questions, and it's like they remember your answer from the last time, and then they ask you updates on it or where are you? So it's like a continuous learning. And they provide you with a report afterwards as to your advancements.
And so this is over a much longer time period, correct?
Yeah, you can log in on a day. They encourage that you do it on a daily basis. I usually make it once every 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
But they remember what you're doing and they give you scenarios based on what you said you wanted to do.
Do you remember the name of the platform or the application?
It's I don't remember, I have it, but it's one that is being developed to for the military.
Okay,
But
that makes sense.
and it's more for emotion, whether or not people are ready to do things. But I can see that if you're getting ready to take a fighter pilot plane up, are you mentally at a place where you can then do that? Are you exhausted? But I can see that same scenario being used here, where you said last time you wanted to work on this, and this is what you were working on. Here's some more situations, and then actually using that to evaluate the learning, but actually looking at you to see, are you really getting it, using your facial expressions, your body temperature, your eyes, that kind of thing.
Okay, yeah. So thanks for bringing that up. That sounds very advanced, but I can see where those of us using learning management systems, so in the education field, there's learning management systems like Blackboard, Canvas, a couple of others. And it sounds like what you're talking about, it's interactive. So it knows what did you do a couple weeks ago, and then it's requesting you to do something on video. So it's facial recognition and trying to judge whatever as well as your response. I can definitely see that as something in the future as well. I have not considered video, but I could definitely see the video integration with ChatGPT. That would be another way to. And then again, if you think about it, what are you really doing? You've got a coach, you've got a personalized coach. And in this case, you've got an assessor that is assessing, is this person ready to do whatever job they're trying to do? And I definitely see that being a space in the future as well. Yeah. And I think learning games are just trying to do that with project managers. We're not always going to, all projects have issues, all projects have fires, but we may not catch some of those edge cases unless we were going into training and we'd hear about it from other people. So if you want to bring learning games into your training, you really need to start with what are the needs and the objectives? What do we need our team or our individuals to learn? That should drive. So again, it goes back to what are your key requirements that you're trying to meet? The requirements should be what drives what tool you use and what you do. The learning game may not be your best option. So that may be the first. Okay. And then what you've got to do is look at how much time you can set aside in your training for the gaming. And then also you need to think about how you're going to have different levels of skills and how does that impact what you're going to be doing. All right. So all right. So as a trainer, you want it to be interactive. You want it to be immersive and engaging and have time to debrief as well. So there needs to be some sort of lessons learned, a retrospective or an after action report. Those of you that work in the military, there's an AAR. It's basically a debrief. What did we learn from this last activity that we did? And then use prototyping to start small. And I apologize, I seem to have run over time. Bill, I didn't notice you're 5. Oh my gosh, I totally walked through it. This is an early prototype of the card game that I built. And so it was really just working with some friends to see what makes sense. And as you can see, it's fairly cheap. As an educator, I didn't have to buy anything other than some construction paper and some pens. And then you want to be able to get feedback. And if you want to or need to scale, anything that's online and technology is really going to get to that point. I'm still in it's still tactical. So I'm not going to be able to scale my card game. People have said, oh, you should put online. I don't know. I'm not there yet. All right. So let's do this. Feel free to link in with me, Bruce Gay, PMP.
Check out our website, pm.umd.edu, for incredible free professional development opportunities. There, you can find courses, events, articles, and more. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who might like it, because learning grows when we make it a conversation. See you in the next one.